Well, hey everyone, good to see you today. Welcome to Crossroads. My name is Jay Kerschner, and I'm the Cottage Grove campus pastor, and I'm excited to be with you today. Our lead pastor, Phil Print, was in Omaha, Nebraska this weekend with many of our staff at a conference. I did not get invited to go to the fun conference in Omaha, and that's why I'm speaking with you today. But the way I see it, we're in Omaha, Nebraska. So who's really losing here? Am I right? Sorry to any Cornhusker fans in the audience. Welcome to all of you here at our Woodbury campus today. I want to say hello and welcome all of you over at our Eagan campus, our Hastings campus, my good friends at the Cottage Grove campus, and anyone watching online at YouTube. Thanks for being with us today. We are in the fifth and final week in a teaching series we've titled, Who is This Man? And for the past several weeks, we've been looking to some first century authors, guys by the name of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to learn about this character Jesus and to learn what he was like in the first century so we can understand what he means for us today in the 21st century. And as we begin today, I've got a question for you. Have you ever been somewhere where you have pretended to maybe be someone you're not? Maybe you were in a certain situation or around a particular group, and you pretended to be somebody you aren't really. Maybe you embellished a little bit, pretended a little bit. I think we've probably all done this from time to time. We're all guilty of this. Maybe without even knowing it, we've done this before. There's a term for it. It's called image management. Image management. It's when we pretend to be someone we're not. Maybe we pretend to be a little smarter, a little wiser than we actually are. We pretend to know a little bit more about a particular topic or issue than we actually do. We kind of nod along and smile and pretend we know what we're talking about. Or maybe we pretend to have a little bit more money than we actually do. We act like we're a little wealthier, a little richer than we are. Or we just pretend that we're just better or healthier or happier or holier than we actually are. This is image management. Have you ever done that? My recent bout with image management happened several weeks ago. A bunch of the guys here on staff at Crossroads were going to join a softball league. They were putting together a softball team, and they asked me if I would like to play on the softball team, and I jumped at the opportunity. I said, yeah, I love sports. I love softball. I'd be happy to play with you guys. So they signed me up. I was on the team. And later that day, it dawned on me that I hadn't played softball in 15 years. Like I literally had not been on a softball field in 15 years. In addition to that, this spring, I turned 40 years of age. I turned 40 back in May. So that all occurred to me, and I was curious if there would be any giddy up and go left in these 40-year-old legs after a 15-year hiatus. I was a little concerned. But the first night came, and I dug out my baseball glove, and I found my cleats, which still fit on my feet, and I got my baseball cap and my sunglasses, got all geared up, stopped at the store on the way there and picked up 2 bags of sunflower seeds because it was going to be a good night. I got to the field, and I looked the part, and I talked the part, and I walked the part a little bit. I even convinced the coach that I could handle third base. After 15 years of doing nothing, I told him, yeah, I got third base, no problem. Well, you can guess what was about to happen. The night was a bit of a train wreck. In one inning alone at third base, I missed 5 ground balls. 5. Like went through my legs or past me. It was absolutely terrible. The next inning, just to make things worse, I missed an infield pop fly. Like right there in the infield. I dropped it. It was one of those pop flies. I even called the shortstop off. I was so sure I had it, right? It was embarrassing. I dropped it in front of my wife and my daughter. The whole time my wife's like, get under it, get under it. I got under it, but I did not catch it. It was an epic failure. I found out real quick that I had very little giddy up and no goal left in me on that softball field that night. That's image management, right? I mean, I talked the part, I looked the part, I walked the part a little bit, but I had no part in any of those games that evening. By the way, I haven't been back since. It was a one-night affair, apparently. Image management. There's a researcher, Dr. Perry Buffington, who identified 3 common places that we practice image management, knowingly or unknowingly. 3 common places. The first place is in the hotel lobby of a fancy hotel. You know, we walk into the hotel and we act like we've been there before, like we come all the time, like we can afford to stay here every weekend if we wanted to. We yuck it up with the concierge and pretend to know where everything's at. Maybe we don't get too excited about the amenities, play it cool because we've been there before. That's the first place we practice image management. The second place we practice it is on the showroom of a new car dealership. You know, we walk into the showroom floor and we see that Corvette in the front. And we go stand by it and look at it and act like, yeah, I could afford that. But I don't really need another Corvette. I've already got one at home. And you kind of just hang around it a little bit, pretend you have more means than you actually have, when really you're there to see the used minivans in the back lot, right? That's the second place we practice image management. The third place we practice image management is when we walk through the doors of a church. Ouch, right? That one kind of stings a little bit. That kind of hurts a little bit. And I got to ask you today, as you walked into one of our campuses at Crossroads, did you find yourself practicing any form of image management when you came here today? Did you have to at any point pretend to be something you're not when you walked through our lobby? Or when you came through the worship center doors and sat in a chair, did you have to embellish or pretend or fake something to feel like you belonged here today? You see, the truth is, many people claim that church is one of the most difficult places to come and just be who they are, be themselves. Church sometimes is the last place people feel they can be real and be authentic. Church for many is the place where they have to clean up and dress up and put on that smile and maybe put on that mask and pretend they've got it all figured out and that everything is okay. If that's been your church experience at another church or even here at Crossroads, if that's the game that you've had to play several weeks or several months or for the last few years, even here, let me just say, as a pastor here at Crossroads, I'm terribly sorry for that. Truly, I apologize. That is not the experience church should be. Church should not be a place where you have to pretend and put on a fake smile and act like you've got it all together. Church is supposed to be the place we go when we mess it all up, when we make mistakes, when we fail, when we sin, when we screwed up again and again, when we have our doubts and our questions. Church is the place we're supposed to go. It's too bad. It's too bad that the Church of Jesus Christ oftentimes tends to not look very much like him or sound very much like him. Sometimes in the church, we don't talk a whole lot like Jesus, but today we're going to see that Jesus had something down. He had something balanced really well that we kind of screw up in the church. He was able to balance 2 ideas really, really well that I think if we as a church can do it like he did, well, we might just change the world if we can do what Jesus did. We're going to look at a story today and see Jesus at his very best. This is a wonderful story. In fact, it's my favorite story of Jesus in all of Scripture. It's my favorite interaction Jesus ever had with anyone. You're going to love it. I want to invite you right now actually to turn to John chapter 8, if you would, and look along with me. John chapter 8, we're going to start in verse 1. This account was recorded by one of Jesus's closest friends and his disciples, an author by the name of John. So we named the book after John because we're clever like that. John chapter 8, starting in verse 1. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. So here in this story, we see Jesus teaching a crowd of people early in the morning at the temple. And then the Pharisees and the religious leaders show up, and they've brought someone with them, this woman. Now, the religious leaders and the Pharisees, they were the God squad of the first century, okay? They were the keepers of morality. They were the self-appointed custodians of conduct in their culture. Nobody was more religious or pious or righteous or holier than they were, especially like in their own eyes, okay? And they've brought someone with them to Jesus, this morning. It's this woman, a woman they've captured. Perhaps she's barefoot at this point, maybe a little sweaty and disheveled from being captured from her home. She's maybe wrapped in a sheet, and here she is now, thrown at the feet of Jesus. She's got no friends with her. She's got no allies. She's got no escape this day before Jesus. We've got quite the scene here in John chapter 8. We have a bedroom raid. We have a parade through the city with this woman, and now we have the interruption of a Bible study that Jesus was conducting at the temple. Look at verse 4. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" This is interesting. She was caught in the act of adultery. The law at that time declared that 2 eyewitnesses were needed to condemn someone of adultery. So my initial question is, which Pharisees and how many and how long were they hanging out, stalking outside her window, looking through the windows to catch her and her lover in the act? How long were they standing outside trying to catch her? And speaking of the lover, where is he? Where's the guy in this story? Where's the man? He's not mentioned here. Last time I checked, it takes 2 to commit adultery. I don't see the second party in this story. Now, the law of Moses was severe. The law said that if you were caught in adultery, you needed to be stoned. You were supposed to be stoned. So the question, the dilemma before Jesus today is what will he do in this story? He's got this woman in front of her. What will his decision be? What will he choose to do? Now, the truth is in this story, this isn't really about the woman, and it's not really about her sin. This story is all about Jesus. You see, the religious leaders and the Pharisees were trying to catch Jesus. They're trying to trip him up and trick him and catch him. And he knew this. He was onto them. You see, his popularity had been rising. He had great crowds following him around, listening to his teachings. He was healing them. So as his popularity rose, these religious leaders, the religious establishment of the day, they were feeling threatened. And they wanted to trip him up. They wanted him to do something or say something they could use against him. But he was onto it. He knew they were trying to trap him. Verse 6 tells us they were trying to trap him. And they thought that they really had him cornered in this story. Now, if he said, yeah, go ahead and stone this woman, follow the law and throw rocks at her, if he did that, he ran the risk of sacrificing his reputation as a friend of sinners, as someone who is gracious and kind and loving. If he said go ahead and stone her, he would risk possibly losing many of his followers if he did that. On the other hand, if he let her go, if he said she can just go freely, well, then he would look like he was soft on sin, like he didn't take the words and the law of Moses, the words of God himself. He didn't take any of that seriously if he just let her go. You could say he was maybe between a rock and a hard place. They thought they had him trapped. They thought they had him in their little plot here. So what does Jesus do? How does he respond to this situation? Well, his move is subtle. Look at verse 6 with me. They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. I love this. He stoops down and starts drawing in the sand before them. He passes entirely on the debate. He doesn't even say anything. He just kind of stoops down and starts writing in the sand. I just think this is fascinating. He doesn't put on his clerical robe and his little collar. He doesn't get on a soapbox and start waxing eloquently about the law of Moses or the do's and don'ts of sex. He doesn't start preaching and waving his finger at everybody. Instead, he stoops. He gets down on one knee, starts writing in the sand. This Jesus of ours, he stoops. And if you've read through Scripture, if you know any of the stories from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you see that this Jesus, he stoops often. He stooped and left the grandeur of heaven to come to earth, to be born in a nowhere place called Bethlehem, in a dirty stable, and he was born as a helpless little baby. He stooped and came to earth for you and me. He would stoop and get down on one knee to embrace children, often children who weren't highly valued in that culture. He would stoop down often to heal people like lepers and people who were sick. He would get down on their level and care for them and heal them. One time, in fact, he stooped down in front of his disciples and untied their sandals, and he washed their dirty and smelly feet. Jesus oftentimes stooped, and here in John 8, he stoops down to write something in the dirt. By the way, this is the only message, the only sermon that Jesus ever wrote down. He said a lot of things and he preached a lot of messages. This is the only one we know that he actually wrote down. And it's curious. We want to know what did he write as he stooped down in the dirt that day? What did he write with his finger? Well, the truth is nobody really knows. Biblical scholars have wrestled with this for hundreds and hundreds of years and have tried to figure out what he maybe wrote in the sand that day. No one knows for sure. I like to think that maybe he stooped down in front of these religious leaders and these Pharisees, and maybe he began writing down their names. And then maybe next to their names, he started writing down the sins that they were guilty of. To the men who were standing there with rocks in their hands, ready to stone this woman, perhaps next to their names, he wrote words like hatred, pride, and arrogance. Perhaps next to the names of the fellows who were peering through that window that day and caught her and pulled her out of that house. Perhaps next to their names, Jesus wrote the word lust. We're not exactly sure. I would have loved to have been there that day to see all of this happening. I mean, you could just cut the tension with a knife at this point as Jesus is writing in the sand. You can imagine the Pharisees' eyes just growing wide as Jesus stoops down and writes in the sand. Look at verse 7. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again, and this time he said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." All right, fellas, you can do this, but let the person who's never sinned get us started. I think this is brilliant. I think this is wonderful. I mean, I would not have come up with this, right? You would not have come up with this, but Jesus comes up with this great line. Go ahead and get us started. Whoever has no sin, get us started. Then in verse 8, he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, what he said, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. I mean, rocks start falling to the ground. Stones start slipping out of their hands, and one by one, these religious leaders, starting with the oldest, perhaps because they were the wisest, or perhaps because they had the most sin accumulated in their life, one by one, they start retreating from the scene. And before you know it, they're all gone. And we're left with just Jesus and this woman. We're left with the lawgiver and the lawbreaker. We're left with the sinless one, Jesus, who really was the only one who had any kind of, the only one that didn't have sin, who could have actually thrown the first stone. We're left with the sinless one and the sinner. And what does Jesus say to her in this moment? I mean, verse 10 says, Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, What in the world were you thinking? Do you not know the seventh commandment? Thou shalt not commit adultery. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Does he say that to her? I mean, that's what I might have said to her. That's maybe what you might have said to her if you were there that day. But Jesus doesn't say that at all. Look at verse 10. He says, Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, Neither do I. Go and sin no more. Go and sin no more, he says to her. You see, there are two ideas. There are two words that sum up Jesus' response to this woman in John chapter 8. The first word, the first idea is the idea of grace. Grace. We sing this song, Amazing Grace. Perhaps you've heard of it. We sing this song because grace truly is amazing. And grace is what separates Jesus from all others. Grace is what separates Jesus from all other religious leaders, all other world leaders. Grace is what separates Christianity from everything else. Grace is getting what you need and not necessarily what you deserve. Grace is you and I getting what we need, not what we deserve to get, not what we ought to get. Grace is is unmerited favor on our behalf. Grace is God's choice to choose to love us and forgive us and accept us and embrace us, even though we don't necessarily deserve any of these things. Grace is Jesus giving this woman a second chance when he could have easily sanctioned her stoning. Grace is Jesus saying to her that day, "Neither do I condemn you, so go now and sin no more." That's grace. And folks, if you've ever wondered, how will God respond to me when I've messed it up again and again? What would God say to me, knowing that I've sinned and I've disobeyed him and I've blown it for the umpteenth time? If you want to know what God thinks of you and what he would say to you, even in spite of your failures and your mistakes and your sins, you need to be reminded of what he said to this woman that day in John chapter 8. He says, "Go. You're free. You're forgiven." That's grace. That's the grace we see in Jesus. The second word in his response to this woman, I'd say, is the word truth. Truth. He responds with grace and truth. He tells her, "Go and sin no more." That's the truth part of it. Go and sin no more. You see, sin matters to God. Sin is a big deal to God. We don't like to talk about it a whole lot. We don't like to think about it very much. But God knows what sin does in our lives. He knows exactly how it wrecks us from the inside out and how it destroys our relationships and destroys our marriages and destroys our families. He knows, you know, the effects of sin as well. He tells this woman, "Go and sin no more." He didn't say to her, "Go and sin a little bit. You're good now. Go and you can keep sinning if you want. We've paid off the credit card, so now you can start charging it back up." He doesn't say to her, "Go and, well, if you can't help it, you can sin a little bit." He tells her, "Go and sin no more." We see the beautiful combination of grace and truth in John chapter 8. In fact, grace plus truth equals Jesus. You put the two of them together and you get Jesus. He balances both of these in a beautiful, beautiful way. In John chapter 8, we see that Jesus is full of grace and he is full of truth. He is always, all the time, fully grace and fully truth. And we see that here in this story. And I need to ask you today, where do you find yourself in this story? Which character do you identify with? If God were speaking to you today, what is he saying to you in this place today? Perhaps he's saying to you that you need to let go of those rocks. You need to drop those stones in your hand. Because if you were honest today, you know you identify a little bit with those Pharisees and those religious leaders. You see somebody's hurt you potentially. You've been wounded, you've been wronged, so you've got these stones and you're ready to throw them. Perhaps it was an ex or a boss or that coworker that wronged you or that neighbor that's driving you crazy, or it was your parents, or maybe it's your kids, and you've got these rocks and you've been throwing some of them and you've got some bigger ones yet to throw. And maybe God today is saying, let go of those rocks. Let them drop to the ground. Or perhaps someone in your family is just going down the wrong road and they're living a life of sin, and you've tried to tell them, you've tried to warn them, you've been talking to them, but they won't listen. So instead of praying for them, instead of just being patient with them, instead of just loving them and caring for them, you've got those rocks and you're ready to throw them. You're ready to teach them a lesson. Or you're ready to get some revenge on somebody that's wronged you. Let me tell you, Christian, today, let me just say, perhaps this isn't your fight. Perhaps vengeance isn't yours right now. Perhaps this isn't your battle that God wants you to fight. And you need to just, in this place today, at any of our campuses, you need to just open your hands and drop those rocks and maybe find some freedom in that. You've been holding on to them tightly, thinking it's your job to throw them. And maybe you need to find some freedom today and just let them fall to the ground. Or perhaps you're here today at one of our campuses and what you're hearing from God is you need to let go of your sin. You need to open your hands and let go of that sin. You identify maybe with the woman in this story. Maybe adultery is not your thing, but there's a sin that you've been struggling with. There are these habitual things you keep coming back to, these really bad choices and decisions and temptations you keep giving into. And you know today you weren't expecting it, but you're maybe hearing from God that you need to let go of that sin once and for all. You need to let go of it. Maybe you walked into one of our campuses and you feel the weight of that guilt and that shame on your shoulders, and you're tired of carrying it around. You're tired of trying to hold that heavy load all by yourself. And you feel maybe with the sin in your life, you feel like you've been shackled and you've been chained and you can't break free from it as hard as you try again and again and again under your own power. You're trapped and you're weighed down. And maybe today you need to let go of your sin. If that's you, I want to let you know that you are never too sinful. You are never too broken. You are never too far gone to receive the forgiveness and the grace we find in Jesus. There's nothing too far gone for God to not be able to redeem with his big, strong arms. He can reach you and redeem you and make you whole and make you healthy again. You see, the truth is there's nothing you could ever do and there's nothing you could never not do that's going to make God love you any less. I say this all the time, but it's worth repeating. It's worth remembering on a regular basis. There's nothing you could ever do or not do that's going to cause God to love you any less or any more. He loves you fully and completely right now in the midst of whatever you might be struggling with. You see, regardless of where we all find ourselves today, whether we're the Pharisee or whether we're the woman in John 8, wherever we find ourselves, we all need grace and truth in our lives. And Jesus is this perfect combination of grace and truth. He majors in grace and in truth. And daily, he invites us to come to him just as we are, with our wounds and our hang-ups and our habits and our sins and our guilt and our shame. We can come to him and find truth and find grace and find forgiveness. Because we have this God who stoops. We have a Jesus who stoops and meets us right where we are. And there's no better symbol of that. There's no better image or picture of that than the cross. You see, it was at the cross that this Jesus of ours stooped to the lowest level humanly possible, to die a criminal's death on a cross for you and me. He stooped down to that cross. And on that cross, amazing grace was on full display for the whole world. It was on that cross when he stooped to it. He died for the sins of you and me and the whole world. The cross is this beautiful picture and symbol of grace and truth and God's great love for us. So today, across all of our campuses, we're going to remember the cross and remember his grace and his truth by celebrating something we call communion. By sharing the bread and the cup, we'll remember his grace and his truth and his sacrifice for us all. So at this time, I want to pass things off to our campus pastors as we celebrate together.